Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss the topic income from house property, and for this we are going to discuss the following sections. These sections are from section 22 to 27. Income from house property, it means as per section 22, it means the annual value of property consisting of any building or land appurtenant thereto, of which the SSC is the owner. It means here the important point which we have to consider while calculating income from house property, that the SSC, the taxpayer, should be the owner of the property. Other than such property other than such portion of such property as he may occupy for the purposes of business or profession carried on by him, the profit of which are chargeable to income tax shall be chargeable to income tax under the head income from house property. So the 2 points which we have to consider while calculating income from house property: number one, that the SSC, the taxpayer, should be the owner of that property, and that building, land appurtenant thereto should be used only for giving that property on rent, and the rent which the property is receiving, that rent will be deemed income from house property. If the building if the property if the property is being used, if the property is being used for business or profession, that the income from that business or profession will be income from business or profession, not income from house property, right? So the property should be given on rent. If the property is given on rent, then that income, that rent, will be called income from house property. Let's move further. Annual value, how determined? Section 23, it says, for the purposes of section 22, the annual value of property shall be deemed to be the sum for which the property might reasonably be expected to let from year to year. It means it is the reasonable expectation that the owner is expecting the property may be let for the year, on the basis of 5,000 rupees a month. So 5,000, so if we just multiply 5,000 by 12, then we will get 60,000 rupees. So it means the annual value will be 60,000 rupees for that particular year. Let's move further. It's where the property or any part of the property is let and the actual rent received or receivable by the owner in respect thereof is in excess of the sum received to in clause A, the amount so received or receivable. Here it means the property, where the property or any part of the property is let and the actual rent received, where suppose the expectation was 5,000 rupees, but on the basis of previous example, the expectation was 5,000 rupees, but in reality the property is receiving 7,000 rupees a month. So 7,000 into 12, and that will means 84,000 rupees so the annual value will be 84,000 rupees for that particular year, right? Not 60,000, which the owner was expecting. So the annual value will be the actual money which the owner has received in his hand. Let's move further. Whether property or any part of the property is let and was vacant during the whole or any part of the previous year, and owing to such vacancy the actual rent received or receivable by the owner in respect thereof is less than the sum received referred to in clause A, the amount so received or receivable, right? It is the same thing. The only thing is that here the owner was receiving the excess amount. Here the owner is receiving the lesser amount than the expected. There, as per the expectation, it was 5,000 rupees a month, which makes 60,000 rupees for the whole year. Now the owner is expecting how much? 4,000 rupees a month, right? For not 5,000, so 4,000 for not okay. Here it is vacant. Here the thing, it's not 5,000. Let me correct, it's not 5,000 rupees. Sorry, it's not 4,000 rupees. It is 5,000 rupees. Here it means the property is vacant for some months in the year. Suppose the property is vacant for 4 months, right? So if the property is vacant for 4 months, then for that 4 months of period, the annual will be the annual value of the property will not be taken into consideration here on the basis of 5,000 rupees a month. So for 8 months, it will be 5,000 into 8, it will be 40,000 rupees. So on the basis of 4 months, so here how much amount is received in the hands of the owner? That is 40,000 rupees. So here the lesser amount which is received in the hands of the owner will be taken into consider will be called annual value, right? Right. So here the amount which is received, 40,000 rupees, right? So now let's move further. Provided that the taxes levied by any local authority in respect of the property shall be deducted, right, in determining the annual value of the property of that previous year in which the such taxes are actually paid by him. Okay, so it means it means suppose 5,000 rupees has been imposed, has been levied by the local authority. So even that 5,000 rupees will be deducted. So annual value, suppose it was the owner was expecting fair 60,000 rupees as the annual value. So there will be deduction of 5,000. So the amount taxable in the hands of the owner will be 55,000 rupees, right? Because there is a deduction of 5,000 which has been paid by owner as tax, which has been imposed by local authority. Let's move further. Deduction from income from house property. So what are the deductions as per section 24? Section 24, it says income chargeable under the head income from house property shall be computed after making the following deductions. So there are the following deductions. Let's see. A sum equal to 30% of the annual value. So annual value, whatever the annual value, from that 30% will be deducted. Suppose the annual value is 60,000, as we have taken an example. So 30% of 60,000 will be 18,000. So 18,000 will be deducted. So annual value will be deemed 42,000. Let's move further. Whether property has been acquired, constructed, repaired, renewed, or reconstructed with the borrowed capital, the amount of any interest payable on such capital. Where the property has been acquired, constructed with the help of some borrowed capital, and the SSC, the taxpayer, the SSC, the owner of the property, is paying 10% on that borrowed capital. So suppose the borrowed capital is 1 lakh rupees on that, and the interest rate is 10%. So the 10% of the 1 lakh rupees will be 10,000 rupees. So the on that 10,000 will be deducted from the annual value. So we have taken the example 60,000. 60,000 minus 10,000 will be 50,000, right? So there will be deduction of 10,000, and 50,000 will be taxable in the hands of the will be taxable in the hands of the owner, right? Owner of the property. Let's move further. Provided in respect of property referred to in subsection 2 of section 23, the amount of deduction shall not exceed 30,000 rupees, etc. It means the maximum deduction will be 30,000 rupees, right? So not more than 30,000 rupees will be. Not more than the maximum deduction will be 30,000 rupees, right? Let's move further. Amount not deductible from income from house property. Section 25, it says, notwithstanding anything contained in section 24, right? Interest chargeable under this act which is payable outside India. It means there is any interest which is chargeable under this act which is payable outside India, not being interest on loan issued for public purpose, and that is not interest on loan which is for public subscription before the first day of April 1938, on which tax has not been paid, or deducted under chapter 17, nor the tax has been paid, neither the tax has been paid, nor there has been any deduction under chapter 17b, and in respect of which there is no person in India who may be treated as an agent, and in that respect there is no person in India which may be treated as an agent under section 163 of the Income Tax Act, shall not be deducted in computing the income chargeable under the head income from house property. It means under 160 there will be no deduction allowed as per section 163, right? So under section 163 shall not be deducted in computing the income chargeable under the head income from house property, right? So as per section 163, deduction will not be allowed, right, under the head income from house property. Let's move further. Special provision for cases where unrealized rent allowed as deduction is realized subsequently. It means initially there was unrealized rent which was allowed at deduction, but later on that unrealized rent was realized subsequently, right? So let us see section 25A, where a deduction has been made under clause 10 of subsection 1 of section 24, right? In the assessment for any area, in the assessment for any year in respect of rent from property let to tenant which the SSC cannot realize, right? It means where deduction has been made, right, as per section 24, right, in the assessment for any year, for any year's assessment, right, in respect of rent from the property, that is in respect of the rent, right, led to any which SSC cannot and SSC has not been able to realize that rent, right? So let's see. Subsequently, during any previous year, later on in any previous year, the SSC has realized any amount in respect of such rent, and the SSC has realized that amount in respect of such rent. The amount so realized shall be deemed to be income chargeable, and that amount which the SSC has realized shall be deemed to be chargeable under the head income from house property, and accordingly chargeable to income tax, and that will be chargeable to income tax without making any deduction under section 23, 24, right, as the income of that previous year, right, as the income of that previous year, whether the SSC is the owner of that property, property in that year or not, right. So it means here the statement, whether the SSC is the owner of that property in that year or not. Suppose in the later year, when the SSC has received that amount, right, that unrealized rent, in that year the person has already sold that property to some other person. So in that year, that person, though that person is not the owner of that property, but just because in the year when he had not realized that rent, in that particular year that SSC was the owner of that property. So there is a direct link. And that particular year when he was supposed to that rent, he was supposed to rent, being the owner of that property. So just because of that just because of that connection, his being owner of that property, he will be deemed, or his rent, I mean that particular income will be called income from house property, right. So here I've explained whether the SSC is the owner of that property or not. So just because that person has sold that property in that respective previous year, and just because that rent which he has received as arrears, and in that previous year when he was he was owner, right. So just because of that connection, thus just because of that linkage, that his income will be called income from house property, even if that person has sold that in the later previous, even if that person has sold that property in that later previous year, so still that income will be deemed income from house property, right. Okay, so now I've already made it clear what is the meaning of whether the SSC is the owner of that property in that year or not, right. So I've already explained it. So just because that person owner has sold that property in the later previous year, still that rent, unrealized rent which he has realized subsequently, will be deemed his income from house property. Okay, unrealized rent received subsequently to be charged to income tax. Section 25AA, where the SSC cannot realize rent from a property let to a tenant, and subsequently that SSC has realized any amount in respect of such rent, the amount so realized shall be deemed to be income chargeable under the head income from house property, and accordingly charged to income tax as the income of that previous year in which such rent is realized, whether or not the SSC is the owner of that property in that previous year. Okay, so let us see. It says SSC cannot realize rent from a property to a tenant, right. So here the SSC has failed to realize the rent from the tenant, right. Subsequently in the later previous year, if he receives that rent, so obviously that rent will be charged as income from house property in that previous year in which he has in which he has actually received that rent, right. Let's move further. Special provision for areas of rent received, right. Section 25B says, where the SSC is the owner of any property consisting of any building or land appurtenant thereto which has been let to a tenant. It means the SSC is the owner of property consisting of any building or land appurtenant thereto, right. It is a land, a building which is appurtenant thereto, and the SSC is the owner of that property, and that property has been given on rent, right. And let's move further. Has received any amount by way of areas of rent from such property not charged to income tax for previous, and that and has received any income, has received any amount by way of areas of rent, and that is areas of rent from such property, and that areas of rent has not been charged in any previous year, right. Let's move further. The amount so received after deducting a sum equal to 30% of the such amount shall be deemed to be income chargeable under the head income from house property, and accordingly charged to income tax as the income of that previous year in which such rent is received, whether the SSC is the owner of that property in that year or not, right. So it means whatever unrealized rent the person has received, the SSC has received, after making a deduction of 30%, right, and that amount will be chargeable in his hand, right. Suppose the amount he has received 30,000 rupees, so 30% of 30,000 will be 9,000. So after making a deduction of 9,000, 21,000 rupees will be taxable in the hands of SSC as income from house property. Let's move further. Property owned by co-owners. Section 26, it says the property consisting of building or buildings and lands appertaining thereto is owned by two or more persons, and their respective share are definite and ascertainable. It means they are joint owners, right? It is talking about co-owners. There are many owners. There are two or more persons, and their respective shares are definite. It means their shares are definite. We can identify their shares, right? So it is their shares are ascertainable. It means we can identify which share belong to which owner, right? So such person shall not, in respect of such person shall not, in respect of such property, be assessed as an association of persons. So they will not be called association of persons. They will be held individually for their respective shares, right? But the share of each person in the income from property as computed in accordance with section 22 to 25 shall be included in his total income. So while calculating that income, section 22 to 25, the provisions of section 22 to 25 will be taken into consideration, right? But shares of each person, so they will be held individually, right? So every person's share, on the basis of their share, they will be charged on the basis of their share, they will be charged for their respective income, right? Let's move further. For the purpose of this section, in applying the provision of subsection 2 of section 23 for computing the share of each such person as is referred to in this section, such share shall be computed as if each person is individually entitled to relief provided in that subsection. So it is talking about they all will be deemed individual, right? And as per section 23 clause 2, as per section 23 subsection 2, right, they will be deemed individual for that purpose, right? And as if each such person is individually entitled to relief, so they all will be deemed individual person, not as association of persons, right? Let's move further. Owner of house property, annual charge, etc. defined, right? What do we mean by owner of a house property and what is annual charge? Section 27 says, for the purpose of section 22 to 26, an individual who transfers otherwise than for adequate consideration any house for property to his or her spouse. It means an individual who has transferred the property otherwise than for adequate consideration. Adequate consideration means the person has no individual has not sold the property for consideration, right? Adequate consideration, right? Has not sold for adequate consideration, not being transferred in connection with agreement to live apart. It means suppose the property should not be given for consideration, right? There should be no consideration. There should be no money involvement that the person has already. It means an individual who transfers otherwise than for adequate consideration to his her spouse. Suppose the person who's going, suppose the individual is the person who has given the property either to his wife, for example, the wife has given the property to her husband, and the husband has given the property to his wife. So this will here the wife will be called the owner, the husband will be called the owner in the respective in the respective property, right? Now the other case is not being a transfer in connection with an agreement to live apart. It means number one, there should be no consideration. There should be no consideration involved, and number two, there should be no agreement. There should be no agreement that just because they have made an agreement that the wife or husband will live apart. So just on that agreement, the property has been transferred to the property has been transferred to the has been transferred to the spouse. So here these 2 points will be considered. Now the number third point is which we have to consider, that is the child. The property should not be transferred to a minor child, not being married daughter. If the property has been transferred to a minor child, so that minor child should not be a married daughter, right? So apart from all these three cases, all other persons will be apart from all these three other cases that will be deemed to be the owner of the house property, right? So I've already explained number one. The point number one is that there will be no adequate consideration. Number two, there should be no agreement, and number three, the property has been transferred to any minor, so that minor should not be a married daughter, right? So let's move further. The holder of an impartible estate shall be deemed to be the individual owner of all the properties comprised in the estate, the holder of it means if the property is impartible estate, right? If the holder of an if the holder shall be deemed to be the individual owner. Suppose if the property is not in a position to be divided, so that owner, that impartible estate, so that individual then that individual will be deemed the owner for the entire estate, right? Okay, so the statement is very much clear. It says the holder of an impartible estate shall be deemed to be shall be deemed to be the individual owner of all the properties comprised in the estate, right? Now let's move further. A member of cooperative society, company, or other association of persons to whom a building or part thereof is allotted or leased under a house house building scheme of the society, company, or association, as the case may be, shall be deemed to be the owner of that building or part thereof, right? It means a member of cooperative societies, company, or other association of persons to whom building or part thereof is allotted. It means there are people, member of cooperative society, there are members of cooperative societies, company, or association of persons, right? And to them, under a scheme, right? To them, a building has been given under lease, so they all will be deemed owner of that respective building, right? And they all shall be deemed the owner of that building, right? So here these three examples which we have discussed about, it talks about the owner of property, right? So I would like to explain this, the point number 2, the clause number 2. The holder of an impartible estate shall be deemed to be the individual owner where the estate is not in a position to be divisible, where we cannot divide the estate. So there the entire estate will go in the hands of that individual owner, right? And that individual owner will be deemed the individual owner of the properties, right, comprised in the estate. Okay, let's move further. As I have already explained, the member of cooperative society, right, company or association of persons, right, building or part thereof is allotted. Even all these people, if they get any building under lease, or if the building is a building is given to them under some scheme, so there also they will be called owner of that building or part thereof, right? Now let's move further. A person who is allotted to take or retain possession of any building or part thereof in part performance of a contract of the nature referred to in section 53 of the Transfer of Property Act 1882 shall be deemed to be the owner of that building or part thereof. All it means, as per section 53 of Transfer of Property Act, it talks about part performance. Part performance means where under some agreement the property has been transferred to the transferee. The transfer has given the property to the transferee for some consideration, and the sale value and the sale. And there has been the price which has been fixed for the property, that is 50 lakh rupees, and out of that 50 lakh rupees, suppose the transferee has already paid 10 lakh rupees, and the rest he will pay after some time. So this has already been agreed. So though the property has not been fully transferred to the transferee, still that transferee will be deemed the owner of that respective property, right? Because under the scheme of this under this part performance principle, the transferee gets the possession of that property, right? And so on the basis of section 53A of the Transfer of Property Act, that the transferee will be deemed owner of that property, and just because of that, if the transferee is receiving any rent from that property, so that transferee will be deemed owner of that property, and that rent will be deemed income from house property. Let's move further. A person who acquires any right, excluding any right by way of lease from month to month or for a period not exceeding 1 year, in or with respect to any building or part thereof, by virtue of such transaction as referred to in clause F of section 269 UA, shall be deemed to be owner of that building or part thereof. It means a person who acquires any right excluding any right by of lease, right? So if there is any lease which is less than a year, so in that case the person will not be deemed the owner of that property, right? So in order to be in order to qualify to become owner of the property, so the lease should be for more than a year. The period of lease should be more than a year, right? If the period of the lease is for more than a year, then only that person will be deemed owner of that property, and any rent received from that will be deemed income from house property, right? Let's move further. Taxes levied by local authority in respect of any property shall be deemed to include service taxes levied by local authority in respect of the property. It means if any service tax which is levied by local authority, even that will be deemed taxes, right? So taxes levied by local authority in respect of any property shall be deemed to include service tax. So it includes, the tax includes service tax also. So now let us we are going to discuss some of the important cases. One is as Commissioner of Income Tax versus Podar, so Cement Company Private Limited and others, AIR 1997. Here the crux of the case, it was held that for the purpose of section 22, the owner must be that person who can exercise the right of owner, not on behalf of the owner but in his own right. It means the owner must be that person who can exercise the right of owner, right? Not on behalf of the owner but in his own right, right? In his own right, as the lease with the property. So the person will be here, the person has got the, let us just take an example of the above thing, which above subclause which we have just discussed, right, where the person has got the property under lease. So there the person is going to exercise right in his own, can exercise the rights of owner in his own behalf, right, in his own right. So he's not exercising that right on behalf of the owner, just because he has got that property on lease. So now he has got a right in that property, right? So after receiving that right, so he's acting as he's exercising the right of owner, right? So now it is clear. Let's move further. Commissioner of Income Tax versus Beman Bihari Shah, 1985. The annual value of property will be included in the total income of the owner, even if he received no income or there is no possibility of receiving any income from house property. It means the annual value of house property will be included in the total income of the owner, even if he has received no income, or and there is no possibility, of receiving any income from the house property, right? Even if the owner has received no income, or there is no possibility that he will receive an income, still that annual value will be included in the total income of the owner, right? Let's move further. East India Housing and Land Development Trust Limited versus Commissioner of Income Tax, West Bengal, 1961. Here in this case, it was held that where a company is incorporated with the object to develop market consisting of shops, stalls, etc., the income derived by letting out the shop and stalls was held to be income from house property. It means where there is a construction company, where the object of the company is to develop market consisting of shop and stalls. So after developing those shop and stalls, so whatever income is derived by giving those shop and stalls on rent, that income was held to be income from property. So court held that income by letting those shop and stalls was held to be income from property, right? Let's move further. Saifuddin versus Commissioner of Income Tax, 1985. In India, a person who builds a superstructure upon the land of another person, right? If any person is building any superstructure upon somebody else's land, the owner of the superstructure, the owner of that superstructure can at the end of the term remove the superstructure from that land. So that owner can remove that superstructure from that land, right? And after that, it was further explained that where A is the owner of a plot. Suppose there is A, and that A is owner of that plot, and right, and a firm consisting of A, B, and C, and there is a firm where A is also a partner. There are three partners, A, B, and C, and they construct a hotel on the plot, and they are constructing that hotel on the plot of A. Then A, along with B and C, were held co-owners of that object, of that hotel. So then they all will be considered, they all will be deemed co-owners of the hotel, right? here, just because even if the plot belongs to A, still they all three, A, B, and C, A, B, and C, they will be held. They were held co-owners of the hotel, right? So they all were A, B, and C. They were held co-owners of the hotel. Let's move further. R.B. Jodamal Kathiala. It's R.B. Jodamal Kathiala versus Commissioner of Income Tax, AIR 1972. Here, it was held in this case, for the purpose of section 22, the owner must be that person who can exercise the right of the owner, not on behalf of the owner but in his own behalf, as we have already discussed, as I have already given the example of lease. So here the owner must be that person who can exercise a right of the owner. So there, because of the agreement of lease, that person exercises the right of the owner, not on behalf of the owner but in his own behalf, right? So he exercises that right on in his own behalf, right? So that just because of that lease agreement, which is more than a year, right? Which is for more than a year, there the owner exercises that right in his own behalf, right? Not on behalf of the owner, right? But in his own behalf, right? In his own behalf. In his own right. I'm sorry. It is. It says the owner must be that person who can exercise the rights of the owner, not on behalf of the owner, right? But in his own behalf, right? In his own behalf. Okay. So with this, we have come to the end of this topic, right? Thank you. Thank you very much.